We tend to take our modern, data-driven view of the brain for granted. We think of it as a computer, right? A super complex machine full of circuits and code. But what if I told you that this very scientific idea has a much older, much stranger, and honestly, kind of mystical history? Ralph Ellison just nails this feeling that's become so common today, this sense that we're all living inside some huge humming system, a machine that's running just beyond our control. But look at the date on that quote, 1952. This feeling of being inside the machine, it's not new at all. To really get this feeling, let's start with a very modern ritual, the brain scan. This is where that abstract idea of the brain as a machine becomes incredibly personal and very, very physical. Imagine it. The whole process is so clinical, so precise. You're told to lie perfectly still, your head is carefully locked into position, and then they give you this little rubber ball to squeeze, just in case. It's your one tiny analog signal in this ocean of digital measurement. It's a moment of total surrender to the technology. And then you slide into the tube. In that moment, you become a part of this massive system. You're not just a person with thoughts and feelings anymore. No, you are a source of information. You're a subject of feedback loops, a system to be mapped, measured, and regulated. You have literally become data. So where did this incredibly powerful idea that our minds are basically just information processing systems even come from? Well, it has a very specific and actually pretty celebrated scientific origin story.
The word for it is cybernetics. It was this revolutionary science that burst onto the scene in the mid-20th century. And the big idea was that the same principles, control, communication, feedback, could explain how complex machines work and how living things, including our brains, work too.
And this whole idea got hammered out in a legendary series of meetings called the Macy Conferences. We're talking 1946 to 1953. You had all these brilliant minds, engineers, anthropologists, neuroscientists, all in one room. And their core takeaway was this. The brain is basically a biological computer. It's a network of neurons just firing away, processing information. And by the time they were done, this neuromatic view was cemented as the new scientific truth. And they weren't thinking small, not at all. As one of the key guys, Warren McCulloch, put it, they were on the verge of conceiving of the all-highest as a computing machine. I mean, the ambition there is just staggering. They truly believed this new science could explain everything, society, life, maybe even God, all in terms of information and code. Okay, but here's the big twist in the whole story. This supposedly new, secular, super scientific breakthrough, well, it wasn't really new at all. In fact, it has a much older and way more spiritual history that's been almost completely written out of the picture. Now, check this out. Just look at the language here. A full 100 years before the cyberneticians, you had 19th century spiritualists describing the brain in almost identical terms. Okay, they didn't say computer, but the metaphor is the same. The brain as a receiver, a network, processing invisible signals to create harmony. The only real difference was the source of those signals. One called it the environment, the other called it the spiritual realm. And this way of thinking was also at the heart of stuff like phrenology. Yeah, I know, today we kind of laugh at it as a pseudoscience, but at its core, what was it trying to do? It was an attempt to map the brain as a functional machine. It saw the mind not as some unknowable soul, but as a system of interconnected parts that you could understand, measure, and maybe even tweak. You had these spiritualist thinkers, guys like Andrew Jackson Davis, calling the brain the organ of record and administration, a unique network. They believed that if you could just understand this network, you could become an engineer of the self. You could actively manage your own internal system. I mean, engineer of the self? That sounds like a job title from Silicon Valley. But this was 100 years before the first computer even existed. So this hidden history isn't just some weird, dusty footnote. It has real, tangible echoes in our world today, shaping modern ideas and even entire movements in ways we barely recognize. For a wild example, just look at Scientology. L. Ron Hubbard's original book, Dianetics, is soaked in the language of engineering. His famous diagram of the mind? It's not a spiritual chart. It's a block diagram, straight out of an electronics textbook. He describes the analytical mind as a perfect calculator, and traumas, or engrams, as literal short circuits in the system. The writer William S. Burroughs, who was an early follower, actually pointed this out. He said that Scientology's main goal, to become clear, was a term they ripped directly from calculating machines. You clear the machine of bad data so it can work properly. The therapy is literally framed as debudding a human being. And this way of thinking is still alive and well even in mainstream science. There's this key concept in the cognitive science of religion called agent detection. The theory is that our brains are hardwired with a kind of program that is constantly scanning for patterns that look like, well, a person, an agent. We're basically biological scanners, and believing in God or ghosts is just a false positive, our pattern-seeking software seeing a face in the clouds. So what's the danger in all this? Ralph Ellison gives us this incredible metaphor in Invisible Man. The main character works in a paint factory, making optic white paint. And he discovers the secret to its perfect, brilliant whiteness is adding a few drops of black toner. The system creates this smooth, pure, uniform surface, but it does it by absorbing and erasing difference. And that's the risk of the neuromatic view. It can give us a clean, neat model of reality that just erases all the messy, unpredictable, truly human stuff. So what are we supposed to do with this hidden history? What does it mean that our super scientific model of the brain actually has these deep mystical roots? Well, it means we need to see the model for exactly what it is, a story. The idea that we are walking computers living in a world of data, prediction, and control, it feels like an objective fact, right? But what this history shows us is that it's just one story, one powerful metaphor. And knowing where it came from, its mystical origins, lets us take a step back and question it, to see it not as reality itself, but as one powerful way of making sense of reality. As a kind of antidote to all this machine logic, listen to this quote from Lux Interior, the singer of the legendary punk band The Cramps. Back in 1978, they played this infamous show at a mental hospital, and what he loved, what he celebrated, was the polar opposite of a predictable system. Real magic, the unplannable, the beautifully chaotic moments that you can never, ever program. And that really leaves us with a final question to chew on. If this story of the brain as a computer is just that, a story, then we have to ask ourselves, what parts of our experience, our creativity, our love, our consciousness, what parts of us just don't fit that model? What part of you lives outside the machine?